Should we be helping Ukraine?
Mr. Reagan.
Should we be helping Ukraine? This is a question that everybody's asking right now. Tucker Carlson is on one side of the fence saying that, we should be isolationist. We should be America first. We should be no other countries second. Just America, that's it. No wars unless we absolutely have to, right? Except in self-defense, we should not be going to war. In fact, we shouldn't even be helping other countries by sending them money or armaments or anything. Then you've got the other side of the equation, other conservatives, and these are not just rhinos, these are not just establishment folks, these are not just people that are part of the deep state trying to steal money. These are people who genuinely care about Ukraine in the Republican Party saying, yes, in fact, we should help out Ukraine because, as corrupt as their government might be, we still have an obligation to the people. This is a difficult question. A lot of people out there don't know the answer. I certainly have questions, but at the end of the day, I do have a soft spot for Ukraine, and this is because many years ago, I had a girl, first girl I think maybe I ever fell in love with, and she was from Ukraine. We broke up many, many years ago, but I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Ukraine. And, I know that there's a lot of good people there. I don't want to see my ex-girlfriend's grandmother in Ukraine having to fear for her life because of a war over there. And so, it does make me selfishly want to help the people of Ukraine. But I do recognize the problems. I do recognize the corruption. I do recognize that a lot of the money that we're going to be sending there, a lot of the money that we're going to be spending to send weapons there and stuff like that is going to be stolen, is going to be siphoned off by corrupt politicians, both in Ukraine and in America. I mean, look what's happened with Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, all the other corrupt politicians in D.C. So I do realize the pitfalls there. However, like many of you, I need enlightenment on this question. And so today I turn to somebody somewhat interesting in my life, the editor of this very show, Mr. Reagan. His name is Yaroslav, and he does all of the initial editing of all of my episodes, or most of my episodes anyway. And he happens to be here today in Los Angeles. He's staying with me for a couple of weeks, a refugee from a war-torn nation. And he has 4 reasons why he believes we should be helping his home country of Ukraine. Yaroslav, welcome to Mr. Reagan.
Thank you.
Now, I had you on the show once before, a long time ago.
Correct. Before the war.
Before the war. And you believed that Vladimir Putin was bluffing.
Bluffing, yeah.
And the reason you said that was because you thought it was because...
Well, I knew Russia wouldn't win in Ukraine. No matter the outcome they would have, they would still lose. It was just a question of time. Are they going to lose in half a year or in 5 years?
Right. So you thought this was a futile effort. Yeah. Why would he sabotage his reign over Russia? Okay. But let's get to today. You to some degree you were right. Okay, because Russia is having a hard time.
They're losing.
Right. So despite the fact that you were wrong in the sense that he did invade Ukraine, you were right with the idea that it would be a futile effort and he would fail.
Yeah, I was wrong because I thought he is not suicidal.
Yeah, he was stupider than you gave him credit for.
Yeah, he was stupider than I thought.
Okay, so you approached me a little while ago and you said, Chris, I'd love to come on the show. I'd love to talk about the reasons I think, as a Ukrainian citizen, why the American people need to support Ukraine. And I have to say, I do support the Ukrainian people in the sense that, I don't want to see people being brutally murdered for the ambitions of Vladimir Putin. And I feel bad for all those people that are in that war-torn nation. I do think that we need to help them to some degree, either privately or through our government. I prefer private everything. I prefer, private donations as opposed to government intervention. That's just me. And we will get to Yaroslav in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. So, is investing in silver today a good idea? Colin Plume from our friends at Noble Gold thinks so. On the national desk, he explained that there had been a huge sell-off of silver because of its low price right now. But silver is the most useful industrial metal out there, and demand is soaring for electronics in electric cars and solar panel circuits as the green agenda speeds up. And as industries pick up after the pandemic supply chain issues, the trend down should reverse quickly, and silver will rocket. Don't miss this. Give the team at Noble Gold a call and join thousands of others who have taken advantage of this blip in the market. They'll guide you through the process and make it easy for you. And this month, you will get this stunning 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin with a qualified IRA of $20,000 or higher. They actually sent me one of these, and it is amazing. It's very, very heavy. but a very beautiful coin. You can't go wrong with Noble Gold. It's the safest place to put your money right now. Call the team at 877-646-5347 and find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. All right, so Yaroslav, my friend, give us your 4 points, your 4 reasons why you think America should be helping Ukraine.
I wanted to emphasize that I am just a Ukrainian citizen. I'm not a political expert of any sort, but I do have 4 reasons why I think it's in America's best interest to be helping Ukraine versus like laissez-faire, hands-free. I kind of listed them in priority order, which I think from most important to least important reason. And first, most important reason why I think America should be helping Ukraine win this war is actually an answer to the question, what do you think is going to happen if Russia wins? Just think about it for a moment. Let's say Ukraine falls within first month or within a week that everybody was actually expecting Ukraine to fall within a week. Oh, well, Ukraine falls within half a year. Ukraine could still fall if Western support stops. So what do you think happened next? Is Russia going to be like, Putin's going to be like, all right, guys, fair game. I'm done killing people. We can be friends again. No, it's not going to happen. Putin's going to amass his strength again, and he's going to go further. Where do you think he's going to go further? Of course, he can go to Georgia, the country. He can go Moldova, the country. But after all, he's going to sip into NATO countries, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And these are under protectorate of United States, and the whole NATO will be involved. Your troops will be involved. Your blood will be involved. This will be a catastrophe. And why I'm saying that, it's clear if you trace it back to the past, since 2008 when Putin invaded Georgia, and later Obama and Hillary pressed reset button with the Russians, and then they invaded Crimea, and we were like, all right, just have Crimea, okay? We're not gonna start a war because of Crimea. Just have it, and let's keep no bloodshed. Didn't help. He invaded Donbass, East Ukraine. We're like, okay, this is enough. We're gonna start defending our territory. And again, it was too little for him. He wants more. So all in all, it's in America's best interest to stop Putin in Ukraine so that the war doesn't spill beyond the borders of Ukraine. So that your troops and the stability, the security of the world, even though it's already shattered, it doesn't crumble. It's in your best interest to stop Putin in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's legitimate. A lot of people have talked about this, how Putin is very ambitious and he may not stop with just Ukraine. This is a talking point that I've heard from a lot of different politicians, comes out of Ukraine a lot, and I think it's legitimate. I think it's possible. I don't know what Putin's ambitions are. Did seem a little crazy that he would go into Ukraine in the first place, but then again, a lot of people do think it's justified in Russia. They think that Ukraine's always been part of Russia and should remain a part of Russia, and that's their position on it. So maybe it would just stop with Ukraine. Just to play devil's advocate here, maybe that is the extent of his ambition. I don't know. But why don't you give us your second reason?
Yeah, my second point is that Russia is kind of like this hub, epicenter of racism, homophobia. They have leaked out evidence that they're torturing people in their prison. In Russia, if you kill somebody, you get a lesser sentence than if you critique the government. In Russia, there's borderline slavery, where how Ukrainian prisoners of war are treated like slaves, like gifts, like commodity, like no human dignity. Russia is this hub of anti-human values, basically, if I would describe it in a few words.
An absence of civil rights, totalitarian government. And what's interesting is they have been saying in some media sources, I assume out of Russia primarily, but also in America as well, that actually Ukraine has a lot of these problems of homophobia and racism and this kind of stuff. And that's a critique of Ukrainians. They're saying a lot of Ukrainians are neo-Nazis and this sort of thing.
Yeah, concerning the neo-Nazis, it's certainly Russian propaganda creating all of this narrative and trying to justify the war. But if you look at the parliament election that we had in 2018, only 1.6% of this ultra-nationalist party, it didn't even go through the parliament. Our president is Jew. Right. Our armed forces is like multinational organization. There's absolutely no neo-Nazi or any kind of Ukrainian superiority movements that would beat up there in the chest and say, oh, Ukrainians are the best or the greatest. It's all Russian propaganda about neo-Nazis. So my point was this Russian is a center of this anti-human values, starting from murdering journalists and finishing up with slavery, basically. and everything in between. They even decriminalized home violence recently. Like you could beat your wife and just get a fine, like bad parking ticket.
If only that were true here.
Yeah, so think about it. You don't want those values to spread.
Yeah.
You do not want those anti-humane values to spread. And like the things they do to people in the prisons, how there was this report that leaked out what they do to prisoners, like they rape them with mop sticks. The guy who leaked those documents, he didn't become a hero in Russia. He was prosecuted for leaking secret information out, sort of thing. So second reason would be if Russia wins in Ukraine, those ideology, they would spread. They would grow. They would get more contagious.
Now, again, to be devil's advocate, to play devil's advocate, like I said, they do say similar things about Ukraine. Now, you've defended that. But the problem with trying to accept ideas about, right, this side, they have no civil rights, totalitarian government, they're a bunch of evil bastards. That's inevitably what one side is always going to say about the other. So it is very difficult for us in America here to hear something like that from, say, Ukrainian media or even U.S. media or even someone from Ukraine and accept it. So it's very difficult for Americans to know which side to trust. It's very difficult for Americans to know if the Ukrainians are telling the truth, if the Russians are telling the truth, or if Yaroslav is telling them the truth, even in this video. So it's just difficult for Americans to hear something that is so extreme about that whole group of people and just to say, okay, we're just going to accept what this guy is saying. So how would you say that? Why should people trust you and not other sources of media out there?
That's a really great question, and I love that you're playing devil's advocates. Devil's advocate.
I gotta push against you, man. I gotta challenge you on these things.
Yeah, if some war would be happening between countries that I would be so far away from me, I'd also be skeptical. I don't know what's going on. But thing is, first thing you have to remember, one side is defending, the other side is attacking. One side is defending their homeland, and now they just wants to kill them. So once you get the base down, you can then build upon it. So one side's trying to justify its invasion, justify its occupation, annexation, and the other side's just trying to say, hey, please, just leave us alone, get out. We're trying to protect our home.
Right.
What would be the propaganda of the defending side? Why would they need any excuse to defend their land, basically, right?
It's not an excuse to defend the land. It's an attempt to convince other countries to help them to defend their land.
Well, which brings me to the third point. The ethics of this war. If you're walking by down the street and you see a kid being beaten up, and you have the tools and means to help and stop this violence, but what, you're gonna just walk by and just observe it and be like, oh, it's really nice to see how this kid is being beaten to death while I have the means to help and prevent and stop it. Basically, this is what's happening in Ukraine. My own hometown city, for example, on March 14th, a Russian rocket flew into the pharmacy where there were a line of people, 47 people killed. 47 people killed with one rocket. Like, how is it just? How is it fair? And then you look at Bucha, people were executed with their hands tied behind their back and the bullet to their rear of their head. Basically, the old KGB style, even prior KGB, NKVD style. So the ethical value, how could you just observe and not help people? I'm actually surprised because this war didn't even have to start if Merkel and United States would just accept Ukraine into NATO. Russia wouldn't have not invaded, people wouldn't have died. And again, whom to blame for this war that started? Because Russia became so wealthy and powerful because the West was doing the policy of, well, if we're going to trade with Russia, they're not going to want to invade, they're not going to be violent. In a way, Germany is right now paying billions of dollars for Russia for their gas and oil. Not to point fingers at anyone, I'm just saying this got to where it is.
You're saying Western appeasement of Russia was assumed to be a deterrent for them to do anything crazy, but it proved not to be a deterrent at all.
Oh yeah, it is for sure. And like Russia invaded Georgia, independent sovereign nation, in 2008. It was such a red flag. Actually, the first red flag when was Putin during his interview to what happened to Kursk submarine. He was like, oh, it sunk, with such a happy smile, like a maniac. That was immediately red flag. This guy is gonna be no good. And then they invaded Georgia, and United States and the West was like, oh yeah, cool, you can invade other country, no problem. Nothing happened to Russia. Then they annexed Crimea, and they ripped off their patches of their soldiers and then pretended it's not them. Like, come on. They later admitted it was them. But like, how could the West just pretend like, oh, it's okay, you can annex and invade other country, no problem. We will deal business with you as usual.
Now, what you're talking about occurred during the Obama administration.
Yeah, in 2014.
And I'm just curious, a lot of people in America say that if Donald Trump was the president right now, this war may never have happened. What do you think about that? Do you think Obama and Biden appease Putin too much? And why do you think Putin resisted invading anywhere during the Trump administration?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have really ambivalent feelings about Trump in the sense I think there are arguments to support the claim that under Trump's administration there would be no war, but there are also evidence to support that under Trump's there would be actually even bigger war. Because the argument that supports it, the argument that says that there would be no war is I like how Trump responded in Syria when chemical weapons were used. He basically gave a couple hours warning and then tomahawked the bases where the chemicals were used. So you know Trump is serious. This is important. Chemical weapons should not be used in that sense. Somebody has to regulate that stuff. But at the same time, Trump is like, America's first, stay out of other countries, pull out from NATO, shorten down and stuff like that. So I don't actually know how it would be under Trump. And Trump several times said that he respects Putin. And while I could see how that is a play on words, because it would be really wise to say what your enemy wants to hear, but do the opposite. Right. Which it feels like Trump was kind of doing. He's like, just tell Putin whatever he wants to hear, but do the opposite.
Do you think Putin can sense that Trump's a savvy leader, and so he recognizes, okay, this guy's a strong leader, and I have to maybe avoid getting on his bad side? Whereas this is how conservatives perceive it, and they look at Biden and they're like, well, Putin can essentially do whatever he wants, and during the Biden administration, nothing's going to happen. Biden is incompetent.
I think that there's some truth to that. Yeah, I think Biden is predictable while Trump is not.
So why don't we move on to the next point that you have, point number 4. What is the final point that you have as to why America should support Ukraine in this war?
Yeah, the final point, the fourth point, would be that in 1996, United States, United Kingdom, and Russia and Ukraine who signed a Budapest memorandum, which states that Ukraine gets rid of its third largest nuclear arsenal in the world in return for the protection of those 3 states, UK, US, and Russia.
Let me try to restate that clearly. We asked Ukraine to give up all their nuclear weapons in exchange for protection against Russia. We said, if you give up all your nuclear weapons, we will protect you against the invasion of Russia. Russia will never take over Ukraine. Is that basically right?
No. It was just in return for protection. It didn't specify against whom.
Well, that's implied.
Nobody could have predicted that back then.
You don't think that anybody predicted that Russia was... Okay, so this was just, you give up all your nuclear weapons, we will protect you against invasion of any kind.
Yeah, we will protect your sovereignty.
And so we have a kind of, not just a moral obligation, we have essentially like a contractual obligation to protect Ukraine, and we are neglecting that duty. We are saying, yes, we agreed to this, Ukraine, and then now we see an invasion, we're like, ooh, too rich for my blood, you're on your own, kid. Which I agree, and actually this is a point that's been brought up by my good friend Sebastian Gorka on his show many times. This agreement on its own, you don't think this is a very strong reason for us to help Ukraine. I think that you could get rid of every other reason, even the moral obligation, you get rid of that. And this contractual obligation, to me, the United States has a sense of duty. If we make an agreement with another country, we have to honor that agreement, right? Our word is our bond. We have to be able to be trusted by other nations in the world that if we say something, we do it. I think that's critical.
I think it's the least important here, because if you shout into someone's throat the agreement, the side whom you're showing this agreement to is going to back off. The human psychology works like that you can't just say, hey, you're obligated to do this, so do this. You can't demand it, but you can just politely state on it, hey guys, remember this? Maybe we could get some help. Thank you. So kind of in that way.
No, I don't think it's something that, I mean, you're looking at it from a Ukrainian perspective. Yeah. You don't think it's compelling in the sense that Ukraine can shove that in America's face and say, look, you have to help us.
Yeah.
But as long, because most Americans don't even know about that agreement. As long as America knows about that agreement, a lot of Americans will recognize that we do have a sense of duty here. Mm-hmm. So it may not be the most compelling from the Ukrainian perspective, but I think it's the most compelling from the American perspective.
Yeah, there are two parts of it. First of it, like, America, what is your word is worth? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And second part of it, other nations are watching at this too, and like Japan, South Korea, other nations are going to have, well, Ukraine had nukes and it gave them up in vain, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So any securities, any guarantees don't work. We should get nukes our own, and then half of the nations who can afford nukes, they would have nukes, and the world would become a much more dangerous place.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, those are your 4 reasons. I think I pushed back a little bit on
Thank
you.
you.
Try to challenge you, try to ask some questions. I just have one more point that I want to bring up before we close here. A lot of Americans are concerned that a lot of the money that we're spending on weapons, a lot of the money that we're sending to Ukraine in whatever form, is being siphoned off by corrupt politicians both here and in Ukraine. I suppose the argument could be that, sure, a lot of times when America spends money, we get robbed. This happens with a lot of stuff. Green energy being a culprit, a lot of different government subsidies being, I think, essentially scams. Welfare, obviously, probably being the biggest one of all. And so you might make the argument that it's worth it. It's okay that we're getting ripped off because this is something that we have a moral obligation for. This is something that we have a duty to do. But have you heard that? Is that something that people talk about in Ukraine? Is that something that concerns people in Ukraine, that the government corruption, people like Kolomoisky, Ukrainian mafia maybe, is stealing government aid? What do Ukrainians think about that problem? How should Americans feel about that from your perspective?
Right. This is a really great question, especially as you're saying, green energy and other corruptions happening within America. I might be wrong on this, but as far as I understand, United States is not giving Ukraine money. It's giving us military gear, equipment. So when you hear United States gave us $2 billion of aid, it's not $2 billion cash. Yeah. It's $2 billion worth of missiles, armor, bullets, you name it. Mm-hmm. America gives us, and it's all American made actually. So what happens is you basically America is reinforcing its own economy because it buys off American companies like Lockheed and Martin. I think they're producing javelins. Mm-hmm. So United States government is paying American companies that are in turn paying Americans that are basically, it's a good for American economy. And then they're giving this to Ukraine to defend ourselves. So I think everybody benefits. I have not heard of cases where actual cash was given, right, and then it was stolen. And then in Ukraine right now, everybody's in the same boat. Like even corrupt politicians, they understand if Ukraine loses, they lose everything too. Right. So this is a fight for Ukraine's survival. Yeah. So the cases where they still happen, but they're prosecuted so severely, and I don't think they're. I believe some officials, American actual officials, stated that they haven't seen any loss of equipment or that was resold or anything, any kind of corruption signs.
Well, I am very happy to have gotten a perspective of a genuine Ukrainian citizen. It's interesting, and I think that it's something that people need to hear about, and in order to understand the situation better, people have got to read about the war, although it is hard to know. It is hard to decipher what is true and what is just war propaganda. But it's good to hear it from somebody who has a vested interest in this issue. But your family did actually escape Ukraine, right? They're living in America now.
Yeah, they evac to Virginia.
Yeah, so that's great. So they're safe. But you do know a lot of people still in Ukraine, and it's a very concerning situation over there still, which is sad. You'd think that the war would have ended by now. When do you think it's going to be over? Do you think it'll end soon?
I think it will end in summer 2023.
Okay, well, that's a very precise prediction. Hopefully you're right. All right, man. Well, I'll probably have you on the show then, and I will mock you for being wrong.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I think that we all need to hear from every perspective, which is why it's so important to have a free exchange of ideas on social media, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere, so you can hear from everyone and get everyone's perspective. So thanks for coming on the show. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Like I said, it's great to have the perspective of a real-life Ukrainian. Now, Yaroslav makes websites. Do you do the programming or just the design?
I do everything.
You do everything. So you need a website done. contact him on the Twitter. What's your Twitter?
Savage Sage.
Savage Sage. And you know what? That's it for us, but I'm going to let him close the show. Let's hear it.
Well, and remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
That's right. Good night.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Now,
President, in talking about the continuing recession tonight, you have blamed mistakes of the past, and you blame the Congress. Does any of the blame belong to you?
yes, because for many years I was a Democrat.